Welcome to the place where you'll hear from HR leaders, people experts, and wellbeing professionals. You'll learn about their personal and professional journeys, hear about the future of HR and wellbeing, and take away actionable insights and tips. This is the HR and Wellbeing Insider podcast. Hi, Sam. Welcome to the HR and Wellbeing Insider podcast today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Super. I'm all right, thank you. Lovely to have you here on behalf of Gaia Workplace Wellbeing. Really excited to hear from you today.
Oh, thanks very much. I'm really excited to be here.
Super. So to kick off, I'd love to know a little bit about you and your experience and how you went from being a crime scene investigator to a workplace wellbeing advocate, because that is a journey on its own, right?
Isn't it just? Yeah, I get this an awful lot, and there's people that just go, the two roles are so completely different, but in my mind, they're really not. I got into work as a crime scene investigator because I wanted to help people. I wanted to, especially those that couldn't necessarily speak to themselves. And when you're looking at murder investigations, that's what you're doing. You're sort of creating that picture to help those that aren't available to speak for themselves. And workplace wellbeing is very similar in that kind of regard, specifically for me. But it's not an overnight. It was not a case of I woke up one morning and went, that's it, I'm going into workplace wellbeing. I left the sort of crime scene world. I actually developed a hidden disability. I developed a neurological problem and was unable to continue being a crime scene investigator.
Right.
The challenges that I faced. And I actually then, I got a job with the Office of Police Conduct, so the IOPC, Independent Office for Police Conduct, and it was about helping independent or civilian investigators learn how to oversee and see what was going on with the police. So if there's been accidents involving the police or deaths in police custody, anything like that, that's what the IOPC investigates. So sometimes you'll see that in the news. The IOPC were notified. That's their role. And I came into it from that sort of like crime scene world to help people with that investigative side. But while I was there, I became a member of our staff group for people with disabilities, started advocating for people with hidden disabilities, and it sort of evolved from there. And I moved from the learning and development side of things into health and safety, and then working on workplace wellbeing, started doing qualifications, realised that I think I'd missed my vocation in life, and it just ballooned from there, and it has become my life's work. I absolutely love it. And I look back on my career in crime scene investigation and I don't regret it, but I know that this is where I was supposed to be. It was almost like it was always leading up to this point. This is definitely where I belong. And so, very interesting kind of career trajectory to where I've got to. But very similar, I think, in some respects.
Yeah. Interesting, actually, because normally when I speak to people and the stuff they take is they go from sort of HR or people function, or it's like a personal trainer, fitness type background, and then into wellbeing. Yeah, never spoken to someone having come from a crime scene investigating background, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I suppose a bit of a cheesy question, but people saying, you've said there, you love what you do, this is where you're meant to be. How do you know it's where you're meant to be, and why do you love working in workplace wellbeing?
I know it's where I'm meant to be because it doesn't feel like work. It really is. I absolutely 100% love what I do. It is about advocating for people. It is about ensuring that the workplace doesn't cause harm. And I think, we are starting to recognise, that the way that we've been working for, X number of years is no longer working for the majority of people. But I think coming at it from someone who has experience of living with a hidden disability, an invisible illness, that sort of thing where you're in immense pain and you're hurting on the inside, but you look great on the outside and people don't get it. And I think having that sort of perspective has really made me much more in tune to how things can impact people in the workplace and how people mask those things in the workplace and how detrimental that is. But there's that saying, find a job that you enjoy doing, you'll never work a day in your life. And that is how it feels. It really doesn't feel like work. It's just, this is what I enjoy doing and what I'm passionate about doing. So,
and that's really important.
Cheesy.
Isn't it? Yeah. Well, do you know what? It is cheesy, but you know what? It's not actually. It's very good to see your passion. And I think it's really important. And I think when it comes to hidden disabilities and people masking in the workplace, that does happen quite a bit. And I think even I've been there in the past with certain things, and maybe not disabilities, but almost hiding things from people in the workplace. Yeah. And I mean, is that something that you see quite often in your role?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like you're saying, it's not always just about hidden disabilities. People with caring responsibilities, that don't feel that they're able to tell people what's happening with them and share and be their whole selves. And we have this really sort of cheesy saying, don't we? Bring your whole self to work. But that was kind of like the forerunner for this psychological safety that we're now sort of understanding. And that's what it's about for me. So whether it's, neurodivergent people who are masking to try and fit in, or whether it's people with caring responsibilities or illnesses that they don't feel that they're able to talk about, whatever that is, we need to be doing what we can in the workplace to make sure that people do feel able to be themselves, and whatever guise that looks like. And if they don't want to share everything, we're not going to force them to do it. But we want to make sure that they feel comfortable to share if they need to, or if they want to. And that's definitely, I think, where I've come from with having that experience of living with this hidden disability. And when I was first diagnosed, I had people coming to me and saying, well, how on earth are you going to be able to work? You're not actually able to say that to me. You're not actually allowed to say that to me.
Yeah.
And it's none of your business. That's for me and my manager to figure out. So yeah, it is. It does come from my personal experience, but it does also come from that experience of being in the police and advocating for people that don't necessarily have that voice or feel confident to say, this is what I'm dealing with, and the workplace needs to help me.
Yeah. And I do agree with that. And in workplace wellbeing, it's in your business name. It's in what you do. It's exploded in the last 5 years, workplace wellbeing. And we've got employee benefits, workplace wellbeing. We've got health and wellbeing solutions on offer to businesses, to organizations, and to individuals. I mean, there's so many wellbeing apps out there in the market now
No.
for businesses and for us as individuals. What is the connection between workplace wellbeing and employee benefits? Because they're not the same thing, are they?
No, absolutely not. And I think what we're starting to see is, employee benefits started for, when it first sort of came into being, organizations that wanted to offer that something more to their staff. But we're now starting to understand that actually some of those things that are billed as benefits are actually fundamental for health and well-being. So we're starting to see this sort of shift in this crossover. And with some of the clients I work really closely with their pay and benefits managers. So things such as like the EAP, it falls under a benefit because there's a cost involved. So therefore, on the sort of financial side of it, it is a benefit, but also it's fundamental to health and well-being. So we are starting to see that shift, but they're not the same thing. Health and well-being should be intrinsic and holistic and embedded in absolutely everything that an organization does. Does that mean that, some of the benefits can be included? Absolutely. And if you can sort of strike that balance where you're getting that information out to people and supporting them with those benefits, whether it's your EAP or whether it's, fertility treatments and hormone testing, things like that, whatever it is that you've got that supports health and well-being, it's about bringing them together. And I think that a lot of organizations are starting to see this, but you're right about this explosion of apps and pay for this and pay for the other. That isn't health and well-being. It can absolutely help with health and well-being, but when we talk about health and well-being in the workplace, you're looking at embedded cultures, you're looking at processes, practices, that psychological safety, and paying benefits is a little bubble that fits in with that.
Yeah. It's quite complex though, isn't it? So for a small to medium organization, maybe they don't have a full HR team with several different HR members in that team. How do they break down the difference between workplace wellbeing and employee benefits? And how do they sort of bring them together, as you've just said? Because it can be very complex when you sort of look out into the market. If you do a simple Google on, employee benefits or employee
Yeah.
wellbeing, the amount of results and things that come up, and it's normally companies or insurance companies pushing products.
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely is. And this is something I talk to with a lot of my clients. And I've actually said to a lot of people that are out there trying to sell products, because for a lot of people, their EAP comes through their insurance. And that's just, it all comes along with that, which is great. But a lot of them, especially small businesses, don't maximize what's available through their insurance company. And I always say the first thing you need to be doing is looking at what is available that you're not tapping into, because there could be things that are there which can help bolster your health and well-being strategy, sometimes with no cost, but often with minimal cost, rather than going out to a separate provider and bringing that in. But I think, we are starting to see a bit of a shift. I think certainly you go to some of the conferences we've had recently and the number of apps and things and platforms that were there, we're starting to see lesser numbers there being sold because organizations are realizing that they're buying these things and nothing's changing because that isn't health and well-being. There's psychology in health and well-being, and it's all well and good having an app, but you've got to help people engage with it. Or the same with your benefits. It's all well and good having it, but you need the strategy, the education, and the initiatives behind that to get people from where they are to understanding that they need these services and can access them. So there definitely needs to be in interaction with those. And in SMEs, this is very much, I spend a lot of work spend a lot of time working with SMEs, and it's the conversation I have is say, right, let's look at what you've already got. Don't worry about buying anything in for now. Let's look at what you've got. Let's look at, how much those services are being utilized. Are they even being utilized? And then let's have a look at how we increase engagement there before you start thinking about what else you need to buy in.
Yeah. And that is true, isn't it? Because I think a lot of businesses have these benefits through different policies and insurance companies and things like that, but they are underutilized. And I mean, and for me, talking to HR reward people all day long, there's always missed value, but that's because HR is such a broad role
Mhm.
now. And I know at Gaia Workplace Wellbeing, you've done a lot of work on bereavement and loss in the workplace,
Yeah.
which is, a sensitive area, sensitive subject, but also really important to be talked about and to be open
Yeah.
about. Is that where an EAP comes in, or do businesses need to go further than that?
Oh, absolutely. Businesses need to go further than that. An EAP is brilliant, but it's very reactive. And I think it's one of the things that I find very bizarre about bereavement. And when a business sets up, they start with all of their policies. Well, we're going to need a policy on maternity and paternity and family friendly policies and all of that. And people forget about death. And when you have a business, the one thing you can guarantee will happen is that someone will lose someone close to them. They will. It will happen. We need to be much more mindful of that and get it right from the beginning. We need to think about what does that look like? Do our policies enable people to have the time off that they need? Are we supporting them? Do we have that compassionate workplace where we can ensure that they are supported, not just through things such as like the EAP or there's counselling over there, but some people don't need that. They need more practical advice. And that's where we have to sort of let people know that EAPs can help with that as well. It's not just about counselling. They can help with the practicalities as well. If you need some advice on, what is a lasting power of attorney, those sorts of things. And it's about making sure that we've got this wrap around. That's not to say that the benefits don't play a part, because they do. And for some, there are some services out there that offer bereavement counselling. But there's a lot more that workplaces can do, right from the making sure that you're providing the right amount of time off for people based on what they need rather than, what a arbitrary policy states, making sure that that's an inclusive policy and it includes things such as religious beliefs and different rites of passage that people have to go through, but also the longevity of grief. Very often, even if we give people 2 weeks off, in that space of time, they're going to be planning a funeral. They might have the funeral and then come back to work. They've been so busy with the practicalities that when they come back to work, that's when they start grieving. But from a workplace point of view, that's when we're like, oh, you've had your 2 weeks off, come back into work and everything will be okay. So a lot of it is about understanding grief responses, what it looks like and how we support people. And that, like many illnesses, it's not a linear trajectory. There's ups and downs and things like that. So I think, when we're talking about bereavement, organizations need to be much more mindful that it is going to happen, but to consider the broad spectrum of what that looks like. It's not always a straightforward elderly parent dying. It's children dying, it's siblings dying, it can be traumatic death, sudden deaths, these sorts of things. And each has so many different nuances to it. So that's why I spend a lot of time. And I think, that comes from working as a crime scene investigator, but it also comes from my experience. My brother died when I was 16. He died of autoerotic asphyxiation. This is a very taboo subject. It's very difficult to talk about and very difficult to talk about in the workplace. So we need to make sure that we're providing people with those compassionate places to be able to say, but this is what I'm going through. I'm really struggling with this, rather than
Yeah.
just like, there's your 2 weeks off or 3 days in some circumstances.
Yeah. And I've been in places in the past where you have a policy, and unless it's, a parent who's died, you can't have time off. Or if it's an extended family member, you don't get time off, or you only get a day or 2 days. And actually, I think what you've just said there is, or explained there, is that it's very complex, because it might not be parent, but it might be an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, but they might have been that mother or father
Yes,
figure in that person's life.
absolutely.
And with it being so complex in terms of bereavement, like you say, if someone has 2 weeks off, they're dealing with all the practicalities, they're going to have a funeral, that type of thing. How does a business manage that? Because yes, a business might want to allow someone more time off or extended time off. They want to support the employee. They also have a business to run and have productivity and
Yeah.
customers and things like that. So what's the sort of balance between bereavement and dealing with someone in the right way and being compassionate, but not sort of going too far that it impacts the business, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. And I am very aware of this really difficult balance. People say to me, "Oh, when good, you're advocating for this time off, which is great, but I've only got a small team and I've got two people off. How do I manage that?" I absolutely understand, that there has to be this balance. And this is where it's very much about having a conversation with that person. We have phased returns to work for sickness. Why not introduce that for bereavement? If you can only manage, noons or a couple of afternoons a week, let's see how you go with things. Let's have a look at the task that you're doing. But one of the other things that I sort of advocate for with a lot of organizations is having a sickness absence code for bereavement. So when it goes beyond those 2 weeks and someone is still really struggling, and they're having that conversation with their GP and they do need that bit longer, then you've got that sickness there, rather than forcing them to take annual leave, forcing them to go for unpaid. That's not to say that for some people, they might end up in that situation where they just can't come back to work. They need a bit more time, but the only option is unpaid. But for me, it's about having those conversations early on. What does that person need? What can they do? Can they even do a little bit? Can we start with a little bit and bring them back in? Because it's about getting people back into the normal routines and trying to get on with life as well. As harsh as that sounds, we do need to continue. At some point, we have to get up every day and keep breathing in and out and going about our lives. And if the workplace can be supportive, and help that person by bringing them in that phased way, then, there's a potential there to sort of help manage some of the business needs with some of the individual needs. But I do know, especially in small businesses, it can be really, really tricky with getting that balance right.
Yeah. So thinking about that, what would you say are a couple of things HR leaders, business leaders, what could they do now to really help implement a proper bereavement process policy to help people? Because they might have this old school policy where you're only allowed so much time off in place, and they might be sitting there thinking, well, we've done our bit. But like you said, everyone experiences loss, and it's not always just that immediate family. So what are
Yeah.
a couple of tips that you could offer to these people right now, do you think?
Think the first tip would be to review your policy, and is it quite sort of specific in the person who's died, and let's think less about the relative and what relationship that is, and more about how it impacts the person. Because if someone's experienced a lot of loss in their life previously, they might just be yet another death, but it might also trigger their responses from previous ones. So they might need that longer time off. So it's about understanding that it isn't just this, close relatives only. That would be the first thing that I say to look at. And the other thing is to look at not just about the time off, but are you offering it flexibly? Rather than saying, oh, we're giving you 2 weeks leave, here it is. Say, look, you've got 2 weeks leave, let us know when you need it. If you want to take a few days now and you need a week later on, that's absolutely fine. Let's be a bit more flexible with it. So I think that they're the sort of quick wins, as it were, are the things that we can do. There's so much more, but
Yeah, really useful, really useful. And in terms of sort of, being in your position with your experience, from your company perspective, what are you seeing in the workplace wellbeing market from a trends perspective? Because it's very fast moving. There's lots of trends, there's lots of things happening when it comes to workplace wellbeing. What are you seeing as sort of, a few of the key trends for businesses and organizations in workplace wellbeing at the moment?
do you think we are starting to see this sort of moving away from this app-based type of products? I think businesses are starting to see that actually you're not getting the return on investment on it. And that's a lot of the time, that's because they haven't got a workplace wellbeing professional in the organization that can have a look at the psychology and start looking at, well, how do we get people to engage? What nudges do we need to put in place to get people into this path? I do think we are moving away from that. But I think, we're starting to see this really rise of like this hybrid role of diversity, equity, and inclusion with health and well-being. And while to some extent I understand it, because the two do interrelate in many, many ways, they are completely separate. And I think, we're running the risk of getting someone in that's a jack of all trades, but not really understanding the nuances of health and well-being. And I get that a lot. I speak to clients like, oh, we had no idea just how broad, health and well-being is. One day I can be helping a client with their group income protection and making sure that they're making the most of it. And another day I'm looking at, initiatives to help people engage with like you say, the benefits that they've got. It is so, so broad. But I think, in terms of trends, I do think we are starting, maybe it's a bit of wishful thinking, that businesses are starting to see that it needs to be embedded. We need to bring in this psychological safety and things such as 5003. While we shouldn't have to have these sort of accredited programs coming in to force people to do these sorts of things in the workplace, if that's what it takes to get it in place, then I'm all for it. And I'm kind of in that kind of camp as, every business is going to have the different trigger point. We'd love for it to be the moral obligations, but we know that it's not. It's very often it's going to be the financial or it's going to be the legal obligations. And I know a lot of clients, especially those that tender for government projects, we're starting to see health and wellbeing featuring in those tenders. It's no longer just, do you look after your staff? It's what are you doing? How are you measuring it? And what does it look like? So with those sorts of things and starting to see that coming in tender processes, organisations are having to go, well, hang on a minute, what are we doing? And are we doing enough to win this tender? So it comes down to, that's the financial, but at the end of the day, it's still helping staff get to where we want them to be from that health and wellbeing point of view.
You've got financial return on investment and you've got emotional return on investment.
Yeah.
Workplace wellbeing seems to be everyone's looking for the golden nugget to say, well, if you spend £5,000 on this, you get £15,000 back. And we've seen it, there's an EAP calculator out there somewhere. Spend a pound, get so much back. We've seen the Deloitte and Gallup and all the different reports. How does a business measure return on investment in a simple way? And is it possible? Is it really possible to say, this is what you're going to get back?
For health and wellbeing? No. It really isn't. I've sat there in board meetings and they say, well, how much money are we going to save? And, it's so difficult to say. And it is difficult to say. It's like, can I bring down your sickness and absence? Absolutely, I can. But in the interim, it might go up a little bit. So it's about explaining the nuances behind it. And I think it is really, really difficult with return on investment with health and wellbeing, because you nailed it there by talking about the emotional, because it's not always about the monetary. It's about the benefits that you get in engagement from staff, in your net promoter scores. Are they out there telling people that you're a great place to work? Those sorts of things. It's not just about the financial there. It's how do you measure that over time? And I think this is something that a lot of people don't always see with health and wellbeing. Is it's not a case of, spending this amount of money in this quarter and you'll get it back in the next quarter and then twofold the quarter after. It can be much longer than that. It can be much longer than that. And that's where the difficulty comes into. I mentor people in workplace health and wellbeing, and they're saying, how do I get this across to the EC? Because they just want to know, how much money are we going to get back from this? And I can't tell them. And we have to be honest in that and say, look, I cannot tell you exactly how much. What I can tell you is this is how much your sickness absence has cost you last year. And if we put these things in place, we can bring it down. And that's all we can do. And then it's about showing that year on year and going back and saying, look, this is what we said last quarter, or this is what we said last year. This is where we're at this year. So you can see there is that trend. It is going to take time.
Yeah.
It's very much like, they talk about culture change can take 6 years. And I think sometimes with health and wellbeing, we don't always see that immediate return on investment that our financial directors would like for us to see. And it can be really tricky. Sometimes we do, I'm not going to lie, sometimes we put things in place and you can start to see, that sickness absence has come down or engagement rates are coming up or productivity comes up. But sometimes it is that lengthier process, which is not always easy to get your board to understand.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've said it in the past in some conversations when I'm in sales calls and I'm talking to the board or the HR team. And it's sometimes I feel like it's a bit dangerous, but I feel like I want to say, actually, it's common sense. If people are looked after, feel good, they're healthy, of course they're going to be engaged. They're going to want to do more for your business. They're going to want to help their team. But that doesn't quite work when you get to the finance side of things. And that is the thing that, what you've just said there. It's really, really hard to work out. Do you think it's good to have these return on investment calculators in the market, or does it make it more difficult actually for health, wellbeing, HR people to understand it?
I think sometimes it can actually make it more difficult because you've got your finance directors and sometimes, other directors saying, well, what is the return on investment? Tell us exactly how much money we're going to get. And like you say, it's not always something that you can't just put a figure on because you're talking about how people feel. A lot of the time when we talk about well-being, you're talking about how people feel. That is really difficult to measure. It's subjective. It's different for everyone. So that's where we have to start looking at, what are our engagement scores, our net promoters? What is the staff well-being survey saying? What is that, what's going on in other areas and getting that information and that data and saying, look, okay, I can't put an actual figure on this, but what I can tell you is 90% of your employees would recommend this as somewhere else to work. Whereas, 6 months ago, it was only 70% or something like that. And it's about having that demonstration. So I think sometimes they can be detrimental because I think, especially for people who are new into workplace wellbeing, they're lost in this, return on investment. What is the return on investment for bringing in peer support? That's something you can't put a figure on. And it's
Yeah.
the same with an EAP. We're looking at, how many people are engaging with an EAP. Well, how many people need to? How do we find out if they need to engage with it and then if they're engaging with it? And when you start going backwards with these things, you can start to see how difficult it becomes to put this return on investment figure on things. So I'm always a little bit wary when I'm talking to, sort of suppliers out there going, oh, return on investment is 5. And you're like, really? What's the data? How are you looking into that? Yeah, it can be a really tricky one.
Yeah. And also, what is employee engagement? I did a post on LinkedIn about this not too long ago, but when we think about benefits and well-being, for example, is engagement someone opening an app? Is it someone making a phone call? Is it someone making a claim on an insurance policy? Tracking their behavior in an app or whatever it is? What is employee engagement? Because that is something we talk about a lot, and we talk about it when it comes to reward, recognition, etc. And I also think that's, from a provider perspective and from a well-being perspective, it's hard to measure because that engagement piece is important.
Mm.
But what is it? Because if it's someone opening an app by mistake, it's not really engagement. In fact, it's not engagement, is it?
Yeah, exactly. And these are things that are really difficult to track. And sometimes when you're talking to your suppliers, your EAP, they can't tell you. They can say, oh, 8 people called. It's like, was it 8 people or was it the same person ringing 8 times? And this is it. And they can't, oh, well, we can't tell you that. So we're saying, oh, engagement's coming up. But like you say, what exactly is that? And it can be really difficult. And sometimes the only way to get that information is that, the really good quality sort of feedback, surveys, focus groups. I love focus groups where you can actually talk to people and get that actual rich data back from them. Have you used one of these products? How well did it go for you? Do you want to return and use it again? Or like you say, did you just open it by mistake and go, oh, no, that's not for me? So
Yeah.
sometimes, we need to be looking at how we're collecting this information. What is the data that we're getting in and what does it look like? What does it tell us?
Yeah. And data, really good point here. So data in workplace wellbeing, is it important? And if it is, why is it important?
Oh my God, data is absolutely fundamental. You cannot go into any organization and start talking about workplace wellbeing if you don't know what the situation is. And the only way to know what the situation is to get data. It's brilliant going, oh, we're going to be putting in, we're going to put on a series for women's health. Do your staff need that? Have you actually asked them? what's the data? What's telling you that you need this? For one of the clients I work with, we're doing quite a lot around cancer awareness this year. They're based in Sheffield, and Yorkshire has one of the highest cancer rates in the country. They've had a number of people diagnosed with cancer and sadly lost colleagues to cancer. So it starts to make sense. You're looking at that data, and that's not just from the organization, but that's from the community around it as well. Because what we have to remember with health and well-being in the workplace, yes, we're helping the workplace, but that's going to help our communities as well. So it is absolutely fundamental. If you're doing anything without data, then, it's just pointless. It's
Yeah.
absolutely pointless. You're wasting your time because you've got no ideas. It's like just throwing, loads of darts at a dartboard and hoping one of them hits the bullseye. You can't do that. You need to understand what the situation is in your organization.
So glad you've answered with that, because data is absolutely important and it really is key. I suppose the difficult thing is, where do HR leaders and business leaders, where do they get the data from? Because we talk about sickness absence and things like that. And I mean, some companies don't even track sickness absence, and they don't track it in the right way. So where do these people, from your perspective, where would you say small to medium businesses have HR people in, wellbeing people in there? Where can they get their hands on the right data that will help guide their health and wellbeing strategy?
My first suggestion is absolutely always ask your staff, whether it's a survey or whether you put up focus groups and give people the opportunity to actually voice what it is that's what's affecting them and what would benefit them. It's the richest data and people don't tap into it. They're like, oh my sickness absence is telling me this, and our long-term success such and such. We've had a few, we've got some of the health and safety risk assessments that some of those have come through, or exit interviews. We've got some information from exit interviews. That's great. Have you actually spoken to anyone? Oh, well, no, well, I've got all of this. But have you actually spoken to anyone? Have you actually said to anyone in your workplace what would help you to feel healthier at work? And it's a really, really, really simple thing. And a lot of people say, oh, well, we've got an engagement survey. Have you got the right questions on there? Are you asking the right things? Really think about what those questions look like and what information you're getting back from it. And if you're doing a survey, offer people the opportunity of a focus group where you can sit down and you can say, this is a safe space. You tell us, what it is that you need, or what are the barriers that you're facing in getting your health and well-being. Is it, oh, I can't take the time off to go to the doctor's appointments that I need? These sorts of things. It's about understanding all of that. And it very much is about, in health and well-being, we have to be those sorts of advocates. It's about how we communicate with different departments as much as what we do ourselves. So we need to be having a conversation with the person that deals with health and safety. What's coming through from health and safety? What are you seeing? What conversations are you having? Let's have a look at that information that you're getting. Our organizations are full of data that can help us if we just reach out and tap into it rather than waiting for it to come to us. But yeah, absolutely, 100% talk to people, because that's where you're going to get the best possible data that you could ever find.
I think that is really important. And it's about that communication, isn't it? It's about connecting internally with the right people,
Yeah,
health and safety, HR, wellbeing teams. And I think sometimes businesses forget that because they can be siloed in their roles, HR or wellbeing or
yeah,
benefits professionals, and they're focused on their own thing. But I think, like you say, talking to people is so important and can be very easy. And I love the focus groups idea and
yeah.
having those focus groups or champion groups. And it is something I'm seeing actually more and more, focused on different areas of wellbeing and letting employees open up and talk about these things.
Yeah, I think it's so important. Sometimes people look at, we've got a strategy, we've got this policy in place, so that's available. It's like, but are people finding the policy? And if they're finding it, can they understand it? Are they following it? And how are you going to find that out? You're only going to find that out if you ask them. Are you aware that this policy exists? No. Right. Well, why is it difficult for you to find? How can I make that easier for you to find? What can we do to make this journey for you that bit easier? And the only way to find that out is by asking people. And very often it's overlooked, especially in large organisations. It very much is overlooked. It's like, oh, we've got a survey that goes out. Well, that's great, but some people, not everyone's going to have the time to do the survey, and some people won't be able to put everything that they want to say in there. So let's offer them that opportunity of the focus group and having a conversation about different areas, because the data you'll get back from it is just so rich. I absolutely love it. You learn so much. And even things such as like as a health and wellbeing lead, if you're in a large organization, different departments, just doing a drop in. I'm going to be in your department, next Thursday, there to talk about anything to do with health and wellbeing that you want. And then you're getting information about what topics people are interested in. So then that gives you a bit more information as well. It's like, right, well, these topics are really important in that department, but they're not in this department. So let's have a bit more of a look into what's going on in this department that makes those topics interesting. Or like we've seen with one of my clients, cancer is cropping up again and again. What more can we do to support people? Do we have a cancer policy? Can we have a look at bringing in a cancer policy and get an education? So your question on data, yeah, absolutely. If you don't know, it's pointless.
Yeah, I love that. I think you've just really explained that in such a simple and effective way, that data is key. And actually what people can do right now is go and speak to other people in their business,
Absolutely.
connect with other departments, speak to people, gather that feedback and start to get an idea. Even if you've got a nice, fancy annual engagement survey, go and have real conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really love that. Sam, it's been great to have you on the podcast. I really appreciate your time. You've delivered a load of value here. I'm going to link your LinkedIn profile, link your company website below in the show notes. Listeners can connect with you on LinkedIn. But really, thank you for your time. And thank you for sharing your insights today on the podcast.
Thanks so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the HR and Wellbeing Insider podcast. Look out for the next episode, and in the meantime, sign up to our newsletter in the comments below to hear more from our guests and news and tips on HR and wellbeing. See you in the next episode.